Still on the same story, the funerals for people killed in Jenin have been taking place since this morning. 12 Palestinians and 1 Israeli soldier have been killed since Monday when Israel's operation in the camp began. Some 4,000 people were forced to flee the camp during the offensive.
And Israel's military launched airstrikes in the Gaza Strip after rockets were fired from the enclave towards southern Israel. Air raid sirens were heard in a number of places in southern Israel, including Selot. Israel says 5 rockets were fired, but that all of them were intercepted. No injuries were reported.
Well, Arise special correspondent Karl Bostic, who has reported extensively in Israel and the occupied territories, is monitoring developments and joins us now live from London. Thank you for being here, Karl. How successful was this operation by the Israelis if they have already left Jenin after 2 days of entering the camp? Will they be back?
That's right. In fact, you had Israel's chief military spokesman saying that what they needed to accomplish, they did so. In fact, they said it was likely they would be returning also in the future. Keep in mind, they were going into Jenin, which they saw as being a haven for militant groups which had launched at least 50 attacks against settlers and into Israel just this year alone, 50 attacks coming from Jenin. And so their objective was to identify this, to go after the weapons, the explosives, and at the same time to find the command and control centers. They're saying that they were able to identify and destroy 5 labs used for making weapons. They seized 1,000 weapons themselves. They also found beneath a mosque there in Jenin, a command and control center and a cache of weapons as well under that mosque that was used as a command and control center that had cameras that could see all of Jenin to monitor Israeli movements. So all of that was destroyed or seized. You had Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday saying, this is not a one-time event. We need to make sure that people no longer return to Jenin as a refuge for terrorism. That's what Israel is saying. At the same time, this reflects a strategy of what they call, as their approach to fighting against the Palestinian militants, mowing the grass or mowing the lawn. Just cut it short enough so that they do not necessarily deter so that it never happens again, but limit their capabilities. And that's why we could just see really even greater cycles of violence because, for example, we didn't see tanks going into Jenin, we didn't see armored personnel carriers, but you did see heavy armored equipment, armed bulldozers, for example, and you did see infantry troops, as many as 1,000 troops going into Jenin on foot. But there's a sign that they could be coming much, much stronger and heavier the next time around. And in fact, the rockets you saw coming in from Gaza, they were as much as a celebration as a warning. Celebration because they felt as though they had driven the Israelis back after only 2 days of fighting. In fact, most of the fighting was in the first day itself, on Monday. You mentioned those funerals for 12 people. Well, 10 of them were killed on Monday. And among those 12, 4 were under the age of 18 years old.
Very good, Karl. And from the footage we've been seeing for some time now, there was a lot of destruction of the infrastructure there. Can you explain more about why so much was damaged in the conflict?
Well, besides just the sort of damage you would see with, burnt out cars, pulverized by bulldozers, houses destroyed, windows smashed, and doors broken down. You saw a lot of the roads into Jenin torn up, dug up by these armed bulldozers. And they actually reflect an incident that happened 2 weeks ago when you had undercover operatives, Israeli military, using an armored vehicle to try to arrest a militant suspect in the Jenin camp. Well, what happened was that armored vehicle, as it was approaching the camp, it blew up. A roadside bomb, an IED, had been placed underneath the road, and it disabled that vehicle. And as a result, the soldiers had to evacuate it, and then the militants opened fire. At least 7 Israeli soldiers were then injured in that firefight. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to make sure that they remove any possibility that IED explosives can be buried beneath the streets of Jenin. So that's why you saw so much destruction of the infrastructure, streets dug up, but also power cables and water supplies as well. There's no power, no water in Jenin. The irony is this, who's going to fix it? Who's going to repair it? Israel will wind up probably having to pay for a lot of that because they contribute money to the Palestinian Authority, which has no presence there. So if anything, this will be paying through the Palestinian Authority in an effort to restore the infrastructure. And that's why this is really more of a mowing the grass operation to make sure this happens no time soon.
All right, then, can you take us through what you see, Karl, as some of the forces that drive these tensions that may even cause further escalation?
You need to keep in mind that really the last major intifada, which means uprising, that happened at the beginning of the 2000s. And the last time Jenin was heavily, shall we say, the heavy fighting in Jenin was back in 2002. So that's 21 years ago. I think there are at least a few or three main forces at play right now. You've got the most conservative right-wing government in Israel ever since the founding of Israel back in 1948, where they are committed to expanding settlers in the disputed territories of the West Bank. Right now, there are about 450 to 500,000 settlers now in this disputed territory. That could be territory for a future Palestinian state. Well, a stated aim of cabinet ministers in Israel's government now is to double the number of settlers to almost 1 million. So you're talking about expanding settlements and seizing more land from the Palestinians in this disputed territory. That's fueling a lot of anger right there. You also have the Palestinian Authority, which has no presence at all in the Jenin camp. There haven't been elections since 2006. So right now it's seen as ineffective and, in fact, as corrupt. And places like Jenin are basically the refugee camp of no more than 14,000, a half square mile. It's being run by militant groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. So that's the problem right there on the Palestinian side. And then finally, look at the demographics of the population. You have a large portion of the population which has no memory of the second uprising. The Palestinian society is a very young society. About a third of the Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza are under the age of 30. You have about 60% under the age of 25 or so. For example, we talked about that funeral of which 4 people were under the age of 18. One of the combatants that the militant groups claimed was a member of this was only 16 years old. So not only do you have a very young society, but one that feels there's no hope for their future. And that's why you see them taking up arms, because unemployment's very, very high, 30, 40%. So no hope in terms of jobs, education, and health as well. And until those forces are resolved, in the end, it's got to be a diplomatic solution. This is going to really escalate. It won't be just Jenin. It could go into Ramallah, it could go into Nablus and West Bank. And then the worst case scenarios, you could have a repeat of what you had back in the beginning of the 2000s, second Intifada, when you had suicide bombings on the streets of Israel, in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Indeed, you're right. It's an unending saga between the Palestinians and, of course, the Israelis over this settlement and, of course, the camps, and possibility we might see this more in the future. Karl Bostic, many thanks for your thoughts on those issues. Good to have you.